Good morning, good morning, good morning. No CCTV today, I'm afraid, because I'm in the other car. So I could put, I mean, I've got plenty of them. Perhaps I'll put one of the other ones on. But because you won't be seeing the weather, it's an overcast, grey, low white cloud. Perfect for photography. Let me just, there we are. So how are you? How are you? Hope you're well. I'm very well. It's Thursday. I didn't work yesterday. Got tomorrow afternoon off. Finish at 2:30 on Monday and Tuesday. So I'm not overstressing myself. The bills are getting paid. So I've got quite a nice life. I hope you have the same. I know you're probably fed up with hearing about tariffs and stuff like that, but I've been following it all quite closely. Me and Mrs. Angry, and I think if you're going to be successful in life, you have to have like a correct worldview. You have to know how things work and be able to connect the dots, tie the bits of ends of frayed string together, etc. And then test your model against the real world and see if it works. Predict something and see if what you've predicted actually happens. Now, I'm not saying that you can sort of get a crystal ball or anything, but at least if you've got an ability to generally understand where we are and where we're going, then obviously you're going to do better, aren't you? Economically, and as a dentist, which as a dentist you have to be, because you're an entrepreneur, and you and a business person, you need to have a very sort of keen idea of what the economic conditions are. There's a lorry bowling up the back of me. I've got some temporary traffic lights. It's right into the hedge. Okay, look. So let me get on with it, right? So just for the set the scene, Donald Trump, out of the blue, announced tariffs on goods imported into America from almost every country, pretty much every country, which were a minimum flat rate 10% for everybody, and then a variable amount on top, depending on their trade deficit with that country. And it's nothing to do with the services trade deficit, because quite often America has a services trade surplus. But where they have a manufacturing or a goods trade deficit, they've decided to try and tariff the incoming goods to the point of neutrality, and that is to really equalize, or to sort of eliminate is the word I'm looking for. Eliminate any advantage any other country has over America in terms of trade. So, for example, if America's exporting 50 billion in goods and they're importing 100, then what they'll do is they're not going to tariff the difference, 50, but they'll tariff half the difference, 25. And it's a bit like saying, well, you've got a big advantage over us in terms of trade, so we're not going to take all of that, but we're going to tax you half of it. And the reason, but the problem is that the tax is not paid by the country that's winning the trade war. It's paid by the Americans. The Americans are given the option of continuing to trade with that country, to continue to buy goods from that country, but at a price which gives the American government half of the competitive advantage that that country has. And the third party country, like whether it's Malaysia or whatever, is then also has the option of continuing to sell into America, but lose half of their competitive advantage in terms of trade, or to send their goods elsewhere, either consume them internally or sell them somewhere else on the world stage. And the Americans are hoping that people's profit margins are sufficient to, and the American market is big enough for them to want to continue to sell into the American market, that they can't, in most cases, do without the American market. And there's a little bit of a lack of coordination here, because the Americans could, if they organised it, they could have said, you either pay us, and don't think that you can send your goods anywhere else, because we've got a bunch of other people that are prepared to act with us and refuse to take your goods if you do send them anywhere else. But they're not doing that. And in any case, the whole thing is moot now, because the American government has put a 90-day moratorium on these tariffs. So they're keeping the 10%, but they've, at the end, the tariff in excess of 10% has been delayed by 90 days. And that's because what they did was unexpected, came out of the blue, very short notice, which it has to be. You can't, if you're announcing fines or whatever, you can't tell people 3 months in advance, because all they'll do is they'll just import 2 years worth of goods into your country and wait and sit back and wait until the American public puts you under so much pressure because of the increased prices and the lack of goods on the shelves that the tariffs are abolished. And it's true, in my opinion, that countries that do put tariffs on tend to suffer more than the countries which have the tariffs put on them. So, what can we learn from this? Okay, so I mean, if you're going to cross the Channel, it makes sense to sort of swim in the direction of France initially, even if you don't go there in an absolute direct line. You need to push off in the right direction. So this is us pushing off in the right direction. Okay, you have to understand that putting tariffs on in this way was a huge mistake. And the reason why the Americans are not winning any trade wars is because they're ridiculously uncompetitive. And that's why all their industry got offshored. Now, the reason why they're uncompetitive is they've got a massive state, and they've got to support, I mean, there's too much government spending. There's too much in the way of entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They've got the biggest armed forces in the world, bigger than all the other armed forces put together. They're totally out of control. They're like your partner who's got already maxed out 10 credit cards and has taken out an 11th credit card to pay the interest on the first 10. And he's also trying to spend and buy stuff on that card as well. So they've got an overspending problem, they've got an inefficiency, massive bloated bureaucracy problem, and they've got a union problem. And it's quite telling that when Trump announced the tariffs on April 2nd, on what he called Independence Day, they had a representative of the Union of Auto Workers there, which is the main union in the car manufacturing in America. And not only was he allowed to shake hands with the president on the president's way to the podium, but he was also, Trump called out the UAW members who were there in the audience, been invited, and also the UAW guy was allowed to speak from the podium for a couple of minutes and say what a great bloke President Trump was. So they have got, Trump and he's putting pretty tight with the unions. He's the Border Control Union, the Fire Brigade Union, Police Union, all endorsed Trump for president. And so on these sort of promises made, promises kept platform, He's delivering for the unions, and so there's no chance at all that Americans can eliminate any trade deficits with anybody. The other countries that are in trade surplus are because they've got advantages over America. They've got smaller governments, they've got less regulation, perhaps cheaper wages, and resources that America doesn't have, such as rubber. America's not going to start growing its own rubber anytime soon. So it's just a case of someone who's losing a battle, ignoring the reasons why they're losing, and just saying, well, I'm going to use my power, my fiat, my edict, to equalise the playing field. So you have to. Me and Mrs. Angry had quite an interesting discussion this morning about whether or not, why, because he reversed this, or rather he's brought in this 90-day moratorium. Why, if I am shouting at the television every morning, Trump hasn't got somebody shouting at him, telling him what I'm telling her, which is a huge mistake, and it's going to be fun and going to cost me a lot in popcorn to try and just to listen, to get through it, just to get through the effects of it. Oh, just junction of death. Might not be a junction of death in your journey, but I am. Anyway, no death, not today. Grim Reaper, I laugh at you. Probably that was a bad idea. Shouldn't really laugh at the Grim Reaper. And we were, and it's a sort of a cock-up versus conspiracy, the age-old argument, isn't it? Personally, I think that they are. I just don't think these people are that bright. I don't think that they know much about macroeconomics, and I don't think, it's quite normal. I mean, having seen a succession of health secretaries and health ministers who didn't know anything about how to run the health service, including one fireman, I think that the idea of just putting someone in charge to make decisions who doesn't have the body of knowledge required to make those decisions is quite common. It's commonplace. And so what's happened is that the Trump, who always placed great store in stock market as a measure of the success or otherwise of his presidency, has seen the stock market crash. Not crash, but I mean, it's been going the wrong way since he was elected. And yesterday, what happened was that the bond market started going the wrong way as well. And I'll just do a little side note about stocks and bonds, so you know why one is more important than the other. Stocks or shares or whatever you want to call them, stonks as they're called in the modern parlance, are a measure of the health of the corporate side of the economy. They're a measure of what companies are generating in terms of capital appreciation and revenue profit, which is turned into dividends for the shareholders. And they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. They go up, they go down with the health, the companies of health, and also the expectation. If you think that a company's going to stop paying dividends, then you'll pay less for its shares. And so there's a certain amount of expectation in stock prices. But they always talk about trillions being wiped off of value. Never talk about trillions being added onto value. But that's the way it works. They get trillions up, trillions down. Bonds, on the other hand, are sort of government IOUs. They're where the government has needed money, and so what they've done is they've written an IOU and sent it to the Federal Reserve, who has then put it on the asset side of their balance sheet and told the Treasury to print an amount of money, equivalent to the IOU, and then the Treasury then spends that money in circulation. So bonds are odd in that they have a fixed interest rate. So you can buy a bond which matures, let's say, in 3 years and pays 4%, or matures in 10 years and pays 5% or something. And because of this fixed interest nature, there's a certain certain oddness about bonds, in that if you can buy a bond, let's say half price, that used to pay 5%, then as far as you're concerned, it's paying 10%, because it's paying the same amount of money on, and you've paid half what you should have paid for it. So you've got a bargain there. So you're getting 10%. But it goes the other way round. If nobody wants to buy new IOUs or bonds, then the interest rates go up, because for that precise reason, so that if nobody wants to buy the IOUs, then the cost of the IOU goes down until such time as the interest rate makes it look interesting, and the other way round. If everybody wants to buy IOUs, then they'll pay more for them, and so the government can afford to sell them with lower interest rates. And the ones that are in the market existing, the people accept lower interest rates. And at the moment, nobody really wants bonds, because they can see that the American government, in common with most other governments, including the UK government, is effectively bankrupt, and only kept going by the fact that it can print more money to pay its debts, which is, a happy situation that you and I are not in. So they don't want government IOUs anymore, and there is a worldwide demand for American bonds, for reasons which are too long to go into. But if you listen to Jim Rickards, I think, yeah, he's on YouTube, and he will tell you quite brilliantly why there's a shortage of dollars outside the United States to be used to secure leverage securities, etc. But you don't have to worry about that. All you have to know is that yesterday everybody said they didn't want government debt, and so they started selling bonds. The price of bonds started going down. So, funnily enough, the price of bonds going down was more frightening than the price of stocks going down. So, as I say, stocks are up and down like a proverbial what. But bonds going down are a big problem for the government, because if bonds go down, then the interest rate you can expect when you buy a bond is going up. The interest rates move inversely to the price. And if you're a government and you need to refinance your existing IOUs, which the American government does, because when their IOUs run out after the 3 years or the 5 years or the 10 years or whatever, and the person comes back with a bond and said, thanks very much, I've had the interest for 5 years now, I'd like my money back that I spent on the bond, the government then says, all right, I'll give you your money back, but only if you or someone else buys another bond. And I'll use the money that I get from selling this new bond to pay you back your old bond. So the government relies on rolling over, as they call it, these bonds. And they have got a lot to roll over. I think it's 16 trillion fairly in the next few years of this bond debt, which is coming to maturity and was paying interest rates that were set 5, 10, 3 years ago, when interest rates were zero or close to zero, and it's now going to need to be borrowed at rates closer to 4% or possibly even 5%, which is a hell of an increase in interest expense. It means that interest expense in America is going to cost, probably already does cost, more than the cost of their entire armed forces. I think it's the fourth or fifth, or might even be the third biggest line item in their budget now. So the idea that people don't want to buy bonds is very scary to them, that could bankrupt the government. What will happen is if people think that they're not going to get the interest on their bonds, or they think that they might even not get paid back at the end, which is a possibility, because one way of getting rid of the debt, as far as the American government is concerned, could be just to default on the bonds, or at least default on 10% of the bonds, and saying that you're only going to get paid back 80 cents on the dollar or something. That would make it very difficult for them to sell any more bonds. So that's why that's unlikely. But the other factor, of course, is that foreign countries hold a lot of dollar-denominated bonds. Certainly places like Japan do. And they've just slapped massive tariffs on Japan. And Japan could just say, well, in that case, we're going to start cashing in some of our bonds. We'll sell them. And we'll sell them cheap. And people will want to buy them cheap, because it means that they're going to get a better than average interest rate off them. And the government is going to say, well, look, we're selling 500 billion in 10-year paper bonds, and we're paying 3%, and the market's going to say, well, why would we buy for you at 3% when we can get 4.9% off Japanese? So the bond market is the very, very important one as far as the government's concerned. They can't borrow anything less than the interest which is payable on a second-hand bond. And at the moment, the interest that's payable on a second-hand bond is approaching 5%. And they owe about 33 trillion. $33 trillion at 5% is starting to add up. You know, it's going to get to be quite a bit of money. So that's why Trump's done an immediate U-turn. It was a stupid decision. Stock market fell out of bed. Well, fair enough. Probably overpriced anyway, the stock market. You know, it's not. No one's crying over the stock market going down a bit. They prefer it to carry on going up. But, you know, you heard that old saying, trees don't grow until they reach the sky. The stock market was overdue a bit of a correction. And... but the bond market, the government can't see the bond market collapse. So they've reversed it. So the bond market, to a certain extent, is a very important check, isn't it? A check and a balance on government action. And if Trump does something really stupid, like, I mean, what's going to happen is, with these tariffs, what will happen is all the companies that are subject to tariffs in America, they'll just sell their goods somewhere else. I mean, you know, we have got a global market now. China will sell their goods to us. Perhaps we might get a bunch of free or very cheap goods from China. We might, you know, and the Americans are going to find that although the American goods aren't tariffed, your Ford F-150 pickup truck or whatever might have a transmission that's made in Malaysia, or it might have a steering column that's made in the Philippines, or, you know, all. So it's not like it's not going to affect American goods either. So it was a stupid decision, and unfortunately, I was rather looking forward to it. I was looking forward to spending a year laughing, but now I'm not going to. There you go. It's all over in a couple of days. But anyway, I hope that helps. You know, I hope that helps you understand why it happened in the first place, why it was a dumb idea, and why the government was forced to reverse it. Trump was forced to reverse it. They just said to him, look, we're going to go bust. If the bond market carries on collapsing and interest rates end up at anything in excess of 4.5% or 5%, we're bust. And so he's reversed it and put it on pause for 90 days. During which time everybody will import everything into America for the next 2 years. And so when they come to renegotiate it, people are going to be like, yeah, all right, yeah. You know, we'll wait until you're swinging from a lamppost and then we'll renegotiate it. Anyway, hope you have a nice day. See you soon. Bye.